Okay, well, welcome to the channel, and today we've got Hugh Chatfield with us, the winner of this year's Dragons Back, so that's 2023, and it's great to have you along. So we're going to have a chat with Hugh, talk about his amazing victorious run at this year's exceptionally hot Dragons Back race, and we're going to dive into Hugh's race, how it unfolded, a bit of his preparation, and give you a real good insight into what it's like to run a Dragons Back race, not just to win it, but that's the whole experience of it, and also kind of how to train for a race. So if you're maybe thinking about doing a Dragons Back race, or you're just curious to know a little bit more about it, then we hope you find this interview really insightful and gives you a little bit kind of indication of how Hugh survived 6 days of running through the Welsh mountains. So it's great to have you along, Hugh.
Thanks for having me, Marcus, yeah.
And it's great to kind of sit down together. So we've been working together as a coach and athlete.
About a year?
It was about a year ago, isn't it? So you'd come to the Peak District to do a race, to do one of the Peak Raid 4 hours. And I think we chatted online afterwards. And then you reached out to me saying, hey, I'm doing the Dragons Back. Can we have a chat about coaching?
Yeah, that would have been about September, October last year. So yeah, about a year ago to now.
Brilliant, yeah. So for those who don't know what Dragons Back race is, it is a 6 day, used to be 5 days when I won it. So this is my Dragons Back trophy from when I won it in 2017. And it's a 6 day multi-stage ultra marathon down the spine of Wales.
Over the Dragons Back.
Over the Dragons Back, yeah. And how much elevation is in it?
17.5k up and down. Yes. So it's like twice Everest.
Yeah, it's an insane amount, isn't it? So not only are you running off-road, but you've got all that elevation thrown into it as well. So what drew you to do the Dragons Back race? Because when you reached out, you already had this plan that you were going to do the race this year, 2023. What was it that kind of made you want to do the Dragons Back?
I don't have the clearest answer or the single clearest reason, but I do like to set myself big challenges, and it's a really big challenge. So in summer of 2022, I did a Bob Graham with sort of coaching and advice from people who I knew in local running clubs who had done it before, and did a time I was quite happy with, around 17 hours at that time. And then from that, did a few more Peak Raid races and getting into the fell running scene more and more, and was looking for the next big challenge. What might that be? And the same friend who encouraged me and said, hey, you should try this Bob Graham thing, had done the Dragons Back. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a cool race. And I sort of signed up being like, that would be an amazing challenge. And it's like any good challenge is a challenge that you look at and you don't know that you necessarily can do it. I'd never done a multi-day race before, even a multi-day where there's sort of marathons each day, not alone ultra marathons every day. So I had all the kind of elements of a really cool challenge. And I'd also never really spent much time in Wales. I think I'd been up Snowdon, but never really explored that country at all. So great challenge and an opportunity to experience something new. But my sort of reason for why I was there at the race changed through time as well. So I don't know if we've talked about this much, but when I first signed up, it was here's a challenge, I don't know whether I can do it. After I trained for quite a while, sort of 6 months after that point, the sort of goal changed from, just complete it. And I was like, actually, I think I can do this now. It became, okay, now my goal is about being competitive at this race. So it was interesting also to go on that journey, just from like finish it to, I can finish it, but also I might want to push for something else now. So that was an interesting journey to go on as well.
And so did that happen as we were working together?
Yes, that did happen as we were working together. Yeah, definitely, right? So I think the type of runner I was come September 2023, when I towed the line at that race, was a very, very different runner to the type of runner I was in when we started working together in November 2022, right? Everything was different, right? By that point, I was probably running in different shoes. Eating was completely different, and the number of miles and the legs were completely different, and had way more. I'd done 2 other significant ultras, so completely different runner, and we've been on that journey. So yeah, definitely.
And how did you find working with a coach, not just myself?
Yeah, so it was my first experience working with a coach over the last few years, and it's been really, really good. I've really appreciated the niggle management. That's been helpful. Someone to speak to when something is a bit tight or sore. Is that bad? Is that something to worry about? How should I adjust my training? And kind of everyone's always guessing a little bit because you don't know what's happening inside your body, but at least it's an educated and a shared guess rather than a shot in the dark. Really good to setting a plan. Like I was pretty comfortable training for a half marathon or training for a fell race or a 3-hour mountain run, but training for I didn't really know what I was doing when I was training for the Bob, and I scraped through that without an injury. But training for a multi-day ultra is a different undertaking that I didn't have the expertise or the experience to take on properly. So it was helpful to build a plan around that as well. And also I think we first started talking, I'd set up quite an ambitious race plan for the year. I'd be like, I want to do this and this and this and this and this and this. And you're like, well, if you really want to do well in some of these races, you've got to cut some of them out and start thinking about A races and B races. So lots of things came together.
Brilliant. And what did you enjoy about having that program? So you talked about that reducing the injury. Yeah, because the danger is as you start pushing the boundaries of a training, and we were taking you into that elite level of performance, it does increase the risk of injuries, doesn't it? So other than those niggle management coming along, what other elements of a training did you find really useful, beneficial?
Yeah. So it's good to be held to account. That's a really good element. So having these are the training sessions you need to do, and if you do these training sessions, you'll probably do okay. It's like a really nice thing. Okay, I'm going to tick them off. That was helpful. Also helpful to not go crazy. I think in an Instagram culture or a social media culture, and you're following all your inspiring runners who are probably maybe already at that level or at a higher level, and they're going out doing these ridiculous runs, it's quite tempting to be like, well, maybe my volume should be their volume, or maybe my pace should be their pace. And that, in some cases, is bonkers, and in other cases, is very misled. So it's helpful not to be caught away with that sort of like, oh, maybe the internet says I should do this. It's helpful to have a plan that sort of suits you and fits where you are, and maybe gets you to that level or further than it, but not at the right time. So that was helpful. And I also, when I signed up for coaching, I didn't know what it would be like. I was sort of saying, hey, I'm enjoying my running. I want to take it to the next level. Let's see. And here I am a year later, we're still working together. So it seemed to work.
Yeah. And so I'm well known as a coach and as an athlete for not doing back-to-back long runs.
Yeah.
And there's even a video of me from the Dragon's Back race being interviewed by Claire Maxted on the Wild Ginger running channel. Yeah. And it's called Marcus's Controversial Approach to Training. And none of our athletes do back-to-backs. I don't do back-to-backs and haven't been successful at Cape Wrath and the Dragon's Back and other multi-stage races. How did you feel when we had that conversation? I said, look, you won't be needing to do back-to-backs. Because as you say, on Instagram, kind of internet, a lot of ultra runners are going, oh, you've got to do long run Saturday, long run Sunday. That's the only way you're going to be successful at these events. How did you feel as we kind of exploring that?
So in my personal case, I didn't know much. I hadn't had a coach before, so I don't know whether other coaches would do that or didn't do that. And we got chatting, and the stars aligned that you had a sort of opening when I was looking for a coach. We did talk about that. I did expect that. I think I was expecting 4 hours Saturday, 5 hours Sunday, that kind of thing. And we did do it a little bit. But I guess that was slightly related to my situation not living in the hills. And when I drove to the mountains, I did need to take advantage of longer recce days. But if that was the case, the pace on one of those days would always be very controlled. So sort of reducing the fact it was a double day in most cases. And I actually found it okay because instead of if it was a normal training week when I'm not recceing specifically, then the other day, let's say it's Saturday, Sunday, would be a hard hill session or something like that. And so you're getting a real bang for your buck from that training session anyway, even though it's not 6 hours. So I think, and I probably cheated occasionally and did the odd extra longer run when I was up in the hills than maybe you would have recommended. But given the guidance, I didn't go too far with that. So that was interesting. But it seems to have worked, right? So why would I change?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the only time I will let athletes kind of do those back-to-back long days. If you are off into the mountains, and you're going all that way travelling to either North Wales or the Lake District, then it's a bit mean if I'm kind of no. Yeah. You can do 4 hours or 6 hours in the mountains that day, but the next day you can only do an hour. Because as you say, your effort and your pace is so much easier than if you're running around the trails, because you're based down near the Chilterns, aren't you? Yeah. So, the pace you're going to be able to clip along the trail there is going to be so much quicker
much
than
faster
if you're up in the mountains. But yeah, it just meant though then that you was able then to carry on training after the weekend, and you were doing double days, weren't you? It was kind of running in the morning and then running in the evening, so running twice a day. Yeah, so to build that volume.
We didn't start there. When we got there, we were then doing 2 or 3 days a week. There'd be like a very easy kind of short. I was doing it at lunchtime, very short, kind of half an hour around the block at lunchtime, and then a more focused run in the evening where I'm thinking about it much more. And that actually really worked for me with work actually. And sort of actually, we're not in doing double days at the moment, but I'm actually looking forward to getting back to that because it is a nice break for the work day. So yeah, and I also, despite not doing double days, another way of thinking about it is, well, what's the overall volume you're trying to hit in the peak time? And we're still hitting maybe we'll talk about this more, but it was around 13 hours a week, I think we were getting to. And you're doing that without, as I said, a couple of longer weeks, but, we're getting there without that. So, yeah, worked out all right.
Yeah, it's just managing that load, isn't it? And I think that's one of the dangers a lot of athletes fall into. They're thinking, right, I'm going to be running for 6 days in the mountains on the Dragon's Back. So you've got to be doing excessive amount of volume, which if you're not careful just burns you out. So we were putting recovery weeks in there as well, wasn't there? There was that kind of nice gentle flow building up to the peak weeks and then backing off. How did you feel about, because there is that temptation, I've got to keep staying at this high level for a period of time. Then we put a recovery week in. Were you getting itchy feet or going like, do I need to, I still want to be kind of building this? Or was that kind of trust there?
I don't remember that being an issue maybe it was. I don't remember it being an issue during that. It was an issue afterwards, definitely. Because I came through touch wood, without having felt an injury from it. Yeah. And then so the sort of recovery afterwards, I was itchy feet after a week or so to get running at a higher volume again, because I sort of got used to it.
Yeah.
I don't remember it being too much of a thing. And I think once you've got a sort of 12-week, 13-week, 16-week plan for a race, and that it's going to look like, and those are the recovery days, you're like, okay, well, that makes sense. It's part of this overall plan. It's not just sort of randomly running a bit less for a week. So I think keeping that sort of goal and structure in mind is a helpful way of doing it.
So you said that you went on this journey of going like, I just want to complete. So hang on, this could be a real interesting race. At what point did that start dawning, or was there anything that you remember doing that was started to make you think, and hang on, this potentially could be a chance to podium or to finish quite high up in the field?
I don't remember a specific moment, but I guess as you prepare for one of these races, like a big round or one of these things, you sort of learn more about it over a period of a year, and you start off by knowing its rough stats, and then you learn a bit of its history, and then you look in, or at least if you want to be competitive, you start looking at the times of people and the splits of people from the past years, and then you go and do a recce, and you compare your recce time to a race split, and you're like, oh, that was like an hour quicker than the race split, and you're like, and the difference being you're doing it as a one-off, and that's like day 3, but when you start doing that consistently, I was like, oh. I could be running a time that these winning times don't seem that ridiculous anymore. But that was, midway through training and having done a couple of significant ultras that we sort of trained up for, recovered from. So I built up an ultra running fitness level. And then, probably about halfway through training, I was feeling like, oh, yeah, I could be running in the top half of the field. But then when the Dragon's Back does a lot of media, right? And so they produced that article a few weeks in advance being like, these are the people to watch. And then I was like back down again, like, okay, well, these people are amazing. These are incredible runners. You've got off and done what Dougie had done, a double Bob Graham. I think you may still have the record or one of them for that. Various things like that. And you're like, okay, well, no again. And you're like, no, actually, look, took the times you've been running, you're going to be up there, and it's going to be a race rather than just for me a trudge. But then we can talk about trudging on the Dragon's Back being harder than racing the Dragon's Back, like being at the back of the field, arguably even harder than being at the front of the field. But anyway. Yeah. I mean, for me as a coach, I think quite early on I had this sense that you were going to be able to perform really well at the race. There was a couple of instances in training when the numbers you put through was really exciting to kind of see. And then as you were progressing through, the way you were adapting into the training and also listening to advice, so like you're saying going to do recce's, but then comparing your recce times to really, race times and times people have won it in, but you adapted then also to back off. So on those recce's, you started to adapt your pace to kind of fit more into the race pace. Broadly run slower.
To make it easier. And then you're actually going, hang on, I can train very easily the next day I've taken that day a bit easier. So it was really exciting for me as a coach to kind of see you developing and how that mindset started to shift as well. It was almost becoming like illuminated, given those opportunities. So when you stood on that start line for the Dragon's Back, and that start line it's
amazing.
Like no other, is it?
Yeah, incredible.
You're in Conwy Castle, 6 o'clock in the morning. There is a Welsh
male voice choir, singing all kinds of wonderful songs. There's the friends and family are around the sort of balcony of the castle, looking in, sort of cheering or whooping and hollering. There was a brief speech, I think, from the mayor of Conwy, or at least someone important in the local municipality. Yeah, and then you get set off to run literally the length of an entire country. And there's sort of this whole mixture of nerves and excitement and culmination. And the legs felt relatively fresh at that point, I guess, because you've really tapered down. And these sort of imaginary niggles I'd had for a week before had sort of vanished as you're standing there, which were all sort of, I guess, psycho, just from my head. Yeah, it's amazing. The start of the race is unforgettable. And then you sort of parade out, as a ceremonial start, you parade out the castle wall before the race starts for real, at a completely undefined point. They didn't actually say when your time starts. Someone said it's here, someone said it's there, but at some point you're racing, you're like, oh, we're racing now.
Because in previous years I've done it, we've had a dibber.
Yeah.
It's one of the SI dibbers, so you dib the box.
And you're like, now we're off.
Now, because it's all more GPS traced, isn't it?
Yeah, just sort of, you were sort of parading, enjoying the view from the castle wall. Oh, okay, we're racing now off to the Welsh 3000s.
Yeah. And interestingly, again, this year, like 2 years ago, the forecast was for a warm, hot day. Where, a few weeks before it had been quite wet and a bit miserable. How are you, had that changed your focus, your plan for the day?
Or the week, I guess, as well.
Yeah.
Well, it was surprising. So a lot of the recce's, I had relatively good weather through the recce's, but it's high up in the mountains in Wales, so it is wet and rough and miserable. And I remember a particular run through the Rhinogs on day 2, which is a really wild bit of terrain where it had been hailing, and I'd worn 2 waterproofs and just been sodden, and it was all kind of miserable. But I got through it and be like, oh, I can do it if it's like this. But I hadn't done any recce runs in like Saharan heat. It was a shock. That was a worry. You're there. It was sort of the day before. You're like, oh gosh, this is a new condition. This is a new enemy I'm going to have to fight, and I'm going to have to think about very carefully. It's not just like it's going to be a bit hot. It was up in the hitting 30 degrees quite regularly. So you have to switch on that. You're like, okay, I'm going to really think carefully about water in a way that I wasn't thinking about before. Are these streams going to have water in them or not? How much water do I need on each of these legs? And there was quite a lot of camaraderie in camp with some of the runners I was with, planning our water strategies for the day together, thinking more about salt and making sure I had a couple of packets of crisps with me and that kind of stuff. And also thinking about effort. On the first day, I remember going up through the Gliders and Tryfan after Ogwen, which is like the bit where the mountains get kind of real on the first day. And some of those climbs, one of them was in the shade, it's like this feels normal, and the next one was in the sun in an absolute cauldron. And you start hearing your heart go in your ears and you're like, whoa, I can't go up this hill at the same pace I normally would go because I'm going to blow up because it's so hot, gonna have to hold back. So yeah, it became something you had to manage rather than just, I guess the weather is always something you have to manage, but there's a sweet spot between a range of 10 degrees between maybe, 9 and 19 where you don't really need to think about it. And if it's getting colder, you need to think about it. If it's getting hotter, you need to think about it. And we really had to think about it at this level.
And so you micromanaging that the whole way through. And how does it feel? Because it's, you were at the sharp end.
Yeah.
In that leading group. And how confident were you feeling when you suddenly had to go, I need to back off the pace here, I need to ease off it? Was that a very easy decision to make? Or were you then worrying about, well, somebody could come past me and I could end up losing?
Yeah, hard decision to make because you're in a race. Well, for my case, it's a hard decision to make because you're in a race at the sharp end.
Yeah.
But a necessary decision to make, right? Like I don't think there was, maybe it wasn't a decision, like as in you had to do it.
Yeah.
And I remember also on day 5, the same problem. It was really hot again. It was hot the whole week, but it was particularly hot in the middle of day 5 through the beacons. And that middle section through the center of the fan dance on these 4 climbs in a row, each one grassy, no lakes and no rivers or anything. And I remember feeling, whoa, this is hot. This is the hottest I've been all week. And I just chilled out and slowed down. And one of the runners, I think it was fifth place male, was chatting to me later that day and was like, I could just see you chilling out on one of those climbs. And I was checking my watch and we were just maintaining the same pace and you looked like you were having a good time. I was like, well, that's a good way to do it, right? Rather than just be like beasting yourself up this hot climb. Yeah, I think it was the only way, right? I mean, you could take a risk and push harder, but it's a really big risk in that kind of heat. The other key thing about that heat was, we all talked about it a lot, was, buff and hat dipping. So the number of questionable, muddy, cow pooey puddles that my buff went into and onto the back of the neck. But, the choice is manage it for a bit and smell a bit. You're going to do that.
Yeah, because I'd just finished winning the Ring of Fire on the Sunday. And as I was driving back, so we drove past Conwy to come back home. I was a bit kind of broken to stop off and see everybody. But I was messaging all of the ones I've been coaching and saying, look, you're going to manage this heat. It's going to be hot. And that was one of my tips, wasn't it? To
buff tipping,
buff tipping or hat tipping. You know, I learned it a lot when I raced in Costa Rica, and it was like 38 Celsius.
That's another 8 degrees.
So it's you know, massive big jump up, and you're just perspiring so much. But then in other hot races, dip in the hat, dip in that buff, just to keep that bit of coolness around the neck and the head. You're not massively cool in the cold temperature, but it just feels a bit cooler, doesn't it?
Makes
it
such a difference.
Adds a little bit.
Yeah, it gives you another thing to think about, another thing to manage that isn't the pain in your legs or how tired you are. It's like, okay, there's another stream, or I've recce'd this bit, I know there's a stream coming up, I'll have a drink and I'll, you know, it's just what you had to do. And I guess had the conditions been miserable and haily and headwinds, it would have been a whole different ball game and things you need to think about how you're going to stay warm, about the mental games you're going to play to stay moving, like those kind of things. That was just the particular challenge we had to face, I guess.
And was there any point in that heat where you were just thinking, this is too much, I'm not going to be able to handle this heat?
No, I think I'm lucky in the sense that I think I've managed heat well when it's come up in races, and I didn't at any point feel, I mean, at some point I was like, this is very hot, but I was like, this is very hot, but I've got enough water because I've thought about that, and I'm not going to run out, and I know where the next stream is because I've recce'd and I've also thought about it. You know, I feel relatively hydrated. I, feel like I can manage this. So at no point did it become too much or too scary. It was just part of the challenge. So
you talked about having enough water there, and one of the things we always do for events and spend a lot of time talking with athletes about is creating a kind of nutrition and hydration strategy. Yeah. Because you want to be in control as much as you possibly can going into a race. So how much was that changing as a race went on to what you'd put together? Because we had put quite a detailed plan together of a nutrition and a hydration. So in that heat, was that always changing, or were you changing that the night before?
I think I can't remember actually. Like, it would be interesting to go back and see, did I drink what I say I was going to drink? I think we built a plan around. So we built an Excel plan that was, or I built, and then we reviewed together day by day. How much food do I need? Grams of carbs broadly. And then how much water do I need, litres, and then a couple of notes about each day, like refill at this point, refill at that point, refill at that point. And in those notes, we'd included, if hot, also refill here, or if hot, start this leg with 1.5, not 1 litre, or 2 litres, not 1 litre. And so that I was comfortable with those type of decisions. I don't remember if exactly what we wrote was knowing exactly what I decided to do on the day, because I hadn't written that imagining I was going to be in a heat wave or with some of the streams being drier and stuff like that. But I was sort of aware of the type of decision I might need to make during the week, and we sort of practiced making that decision broadly by making that plan. So yeah, I don't know whether it was exactly the same thing, but at least I felt comfortable, like, okay, I've thought about this day in detail. This is roughly how much water I might need. I'm going to add a bit more because it's really hot.
Yeah. And what was your nutrition plan like? So those who are watching us, one of the biggest questions.
Eat loads.
We always get, what should I be eating on the Dragon's Back or in any ultra? And I'm sure you've probably been asked this several times because you've heard a podcast. So what was your daily nutrition like? Yeah, so did it work? Did you enjoy eating it every day?
I think it did work because I didn't blow up. I had I had 2 lows. One of them I completely managed and one of them was a real low. But I think in 47 hours of ultra running, that's not that bad. And they didn't last that long. So the plan initially was something like 80 to 90 grams of carbs an hour from mixed source. So a little bit of drink, some gels, some bars, some bonus like non-sporty bars and a couple of bags of crisps. And broadly I had an Excel that said, I'm going to be running for this long. I need this many grams of carbs, add a few percent for conservatism. And then another Excel that calculated how much this bar plus this plus this, and then I made those numbers match, and then that's what into the bag. And then I was at the check-in, like weighing your bag, because you have to weigh your bag for this race, you have a weight limit. You're choosing between like pairs of shorts and extra gels, but I had a plan and this was bonus food. So that was the plan, mixed carbs across those various things. And I think that plan held for, and I was going to eat every hour of every race, and I was going to eat that at all times, and I've been training doing that, which I think is probably the key advice for anyone, is train at that, what you want to do. That plan sort of held, I think, for 2 days, and then by sort of day 3, day 4, it wasn't enough food, so I found, the sort of quasi armchair sciences, my stores were depleted, it just felt like you're running on empty a lot. And in particular, I found a couple of things. One is I found my need for food was higher. I'd eat something and be like, I'm still hungry, I need to eat more. And secondly, I found that for me personally, liquid carbs, like a sort of sports drink, weren't working. Normally I'd bank an hour on a sports drink, but This it was just in, I'm like, I still need to eat. So I ended up definitely on a few of the hours on day 4, 5, 6 eating over 100 grams of carbs an hour, without doubt. I'm not sure what I ate over the whole day, but I ate myself out of food once, and there's a donations box at the Dragon's Back, which I rate for people who've dropped out, which I raided a couple of times for extra gels. And one friend from the race was also about to throw away a bag of gels on the last day because he was flying back to Australia. I said, don't throw those away, give me those. And I had all of them on the last day. So anything and everything. But a couple of things made me okay with that. One is, I trained eating lots. So I knew I could eat all of that and I would be okay. So I was then happy consuming that much food and knowing I'd be okay with it. And also I was listening to my body as I went and being like, well, I'm hungrier than this. I know I've eaten more than my plan, but I need to eat this food. I'm feeling low. But at the end of day 4, that was when I was really low and I felt quite emotional because, you're sort of battling, aren't you, at that point? And I'd just seen my parents or something and I felt so rubbish. And I was out of food. And one of the other runners had came past me and I said, mate, if you've got jelly, have one gel. That's all I needed to get me the last 2 miles to the thing. But yeah, eat varied foods, practice with the foods, do the maths. I think you have to. If you were speaking to Robin, who won the women's race, she also did similar levels of maths. I think you have to for a race of that number of hours. Do that much thinking.
Absolutely, yeah, because you do have that weight limit, don't you? Of 15 kilograms for
15 plus 2.5 plus whatever you want to carry.
Yeah, and it's amazing how quick the food will add up.
Half the bag.
Saving Kate Rath, you've got 20 kilograms for 8 days, so you do have a bit more, but you don't have a drop bag. So you don't have that 2.5 kilograms in the drop bag. But yeah, it's one of the big kind of puzzle parts, isn't it, to solve of your nutrition. It's like any ultra, you can't win your nutrition anyway, can you, going into any kind of ultra? But for this 6 days, you really can't win it. You can't just go, I think I'm going to eat this every day. You've really got to kind of nail it down, be quite concise with it, and then also make sure you've really tested it out.
Yeah, agreed.
Absolutely.
I love what you just said about puzzle pieces in this race, because I think that's true of all races. To run a 10K, you need the right shoes, you need just sprint start, sprint finish, blah, blah, blah. But for a race like this, it really did feel like that. So there was learning the route and the learning the way where you're going to go. Jacob, who I was racing, the guy came second, didn't know the course at all, and that definitely played into my hands. So that's puzzle piece 1. Puzzle piece 2 is just building the base fitness. Puzzle piece 3, dealing with the kind of rough terrain that Wales is going to throw at you. It's way rougher than the peaks and the lakes most of the time. Puzzle piece 4, the water. Puzzle piece 5, the bag weight limit and your gear, sleep gear and other things. You've got all these bits, and so I sort of had some sense of that, but it did really ratchet up for the month leading up to the race. So I was like, right, I've got to tick all these things off. I need to plan all these things, and if that doesn't sound like an exciting idea, then don't do the race. But it was quite fun for me.
Yeah, well, likewise, I agree with you. That's why I love these ultra marathons and these multi-day events, because there's so much bits you have to organise, and to me, I treat it like it's a puzzle. It's not onerous, it's not a big task. This is a fun part of it. It's just another fun part of the training in some respects.
Definitely.
People might question, is that really fun? But it beats kind of watching stuff on TV, or
100%.
But it's controlling those things you can control. It's that part of the process. You talk about trusting the process, but this is really where you are immersing yourself in the process. You're really kind of getting yourself deep within it all and being 100%. Able to control the things you can control. So you mentioned there briefly about camp. How did you find that camping experience? Because it is a camp every night. You're sleeping in a tent with 7 other people. The food is pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
But how did you find that, and how did that impact your recovery?
So for context, and for those who don't know, the team move a ridiculously large campsite through 5 very obscure fields in Wales, and you arrive to a set of tents set up, and also some group tents for food and charging and that kind of stuff. Great fun. We benefited in the fact it was sunny, so I'd come into camp, and I'd be able to I did feel tired and sore, but I'd be able to lie in a river for a bit, and that's quite fun. The camp routine was arrive, chat briefly to the team that were there, wash yourself and your clothes, put them up to dry, put your watch on charge.
How did you wash?
In the river.
In the river, yeah. So there is showers on day 2?
I didn't use them.
Okay, but you end up having to wash yourself in the river, right?
And one river was very cold, but most of the days it was all right. Wash in the river, then go to the sort of food tent and eat as much food as they'll give you. For the remaining hours until you go to bed. Maybe clean your feet at some point in that. Worry about the fact you didn't bring enough pairs of socks. But yeah, and then you just be eating. So there was a sort of soup and chips course, and then there's a main meal and a pudding. And yeah, I couldn't eat enough. I was just hungry the whole time. And sort of after a few hours, you begin to feel like a real human again. Then you go to bed. And then for me, at least, I don't think anyone could really sleep, at least at the racing end. But I was quite relaxed. I was just there, just with my legs screaming in pain, just like, I'm here now. I'm relatively comfortable.
Okay, so your legs were in pain?
My legs were hurting each night.
So people might be kind of thinking, this guy's a bit superhuman. He's
the legs
won
hurt.
The race so convincingly. The legs
hurt in the night. They're clearly doing stuff. Your body's like repairing, I guess. I don't know the science.
Fizzing away,
Yeah, your legs are just shaking and you can't lie on your left, you can't lie on your right. But, I was just there. I was like, this is where I wanted to be. I've paid quite a bit of money. It's a steep entry fee to be here. I've trained hard. I put a lot into it. Yeah, my legs hurt, but, this is cool. Still alive, still here, still in the race. It was a good feeling, even though my legs hurt and I didn't sleep properly. But there's two ways to not sleep, aren't there? You can be not sleeping and really worried about the fact you're not sleeping, or you can be not sleeping, just lying there being like, listen to a few noises, this is where I am. And I was definitely, luckily, in that camp.
So at one point you were like, I'm not getting enough sleep. Because I do talk to athletes about that as well for Cape Wrath and Dragon's Back, but sometimes just being that kind of horizontal for a while. For me it was listening to music. I took earphones and I'll just lie there, listen to some kind of chilled out music, and that would sometimes help me get sleep. But it is very fitty night's sleep, isn't it? And if you got somebody in your tent snoring, did you have any snorers in your tent?
There was a little bit, but not very much.
Yeah, because then you just I became really jealous of them. That was like...
Yeah, I didn't... Luckily, no snorers.
That's good. And how were your feet? So you said your legs were tingling. How many blisters?
I had one.
One blister.
6 days. Well, so two things probably played into my favour.
Yeah.
One is running slightly faster times means your feet are in the shoes for slightly less time. And that does add up. 10 more hours in a pair of shoes is a lot more time in a pair of shoes. So that played into my hands. Second thing was preemptive taping. So I know where I get hot spots, and now before any long run, even training runs, I would just tape them up. And I did that on the week. And so then I had one new blister by about day 5. And there's a medical team there. I could have probably taped it myself, but there's a big medical team, and I just said, hey, this one, just don't know whether to pop it or not. And they gave me some advice and helped me out with it and taped it specifically. But yeah, so broadly, put your first layer of socks on, which is plasters, then put your actual socks on. And I did use toe socks, which I would recommend for a race like that. Maybe a little bit heavier, thicker in some shoes, but to stop the rubbing was probably a good plan for me. Yeah, one blister.
Brilliant. Excellent. Yeah, I also think it's an indication of the amount of training you put in. If you put the hours of training in, that your feet toughen up and cope with that workload. Definitely. And then if you're getting good socks, I like the Injinji toe socks. Yeah, I highly recommend them. I've been wearing them for years.
Okay.
I used to say I'd never got blisters until I did UTMB, but that's another story.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just saying, Cape Wrath, Dragon's Back, no blisters on those events.
They're a good move.
Plus, good either preventative taping or things like gurney goo. That kind of lubrication makes a big difference. But yeah, I'm sure there'll be some people maybe who did the Dragon's Back this year shaking their fist at you going, that's not fair, no blisters.
I can think of one.
Some people get horrific blisters, don't they?
Can be race ruining.
Absolutely, yeah. I've worked with quite a few athletes who unfortunately had to pull out because of bad blisters on the Dragon's Back.
Another tip, I changed my socks midday a couple of times as well. Did you? Yeah. And if I did it again, I'd take more pairs of socks and do that more.
Right.
Because there is a lovely feeling. I mean, your feet stay dry for about 20 minutes afterwards, but it's a lovely feeling, and it's probably worth it. I mean, we had some, because of the heat, they neutralised some of the changeovers, but even if they hadn't done, I probably would have still changed my socks a couple of times.
So you were, in this year's race, you had half an hour kind of welfare check, wasn't there?
Yeah, well, I think which was crucial, because they did use the helicopter a few times during the week, and so one of the heat mitigation risk strategies the race put on was to neutralise the stops for a few of the days. I.e. you check in and you have half an hour and that's free time before you go again, rather than being timed through the checkpoints. Yeah. So use that to drink, eat, wash, clean. So it was great for us. I don't think any of us really used the full half an hour, second counting, but we did all use sort of 25-ish minutes.
So even if you didn't have that, you would still think about changing socks?
I probably would do on a race like that.
Yeah.
Where I would think about it. Because how long does it take to change your socks? Like a minute or two? And how many hours will a blister add? Hours. So I probably would have done. And I would have taken more pairs of socks. I took 3, which was not enough. I should have taken 5, I think.
So were you
get ruined.
Changing socks what you'd worn the day before, putting those on?
Yeah, it was after day 3, it was a game of which of these is the driest. because they didn't all dry overnight, right? And I tried to wash one, but then it would be wet for a day and a half.
Right. So these weren't clean, fresh socks you were putting on?
No. I had 3 pairs, so I had 3 days of it, and then day 4, 5, 6 was which of these is the least horrid, which was day 1's pair, and then I think it was day 1's pair again. I'm not sure.
And did these socks make it home to the washing machine?
I was running in a pair this evening.
Okay.
They're still in my cycle.
They weren't biohazard.
No.
There wasn't. Yeah.
The top is still brown that I ran in all week.
Cardiff Council weren't going, hang on a second, we've got some biohazard here. Brilliant. So if people are watching this and thinking, I'm still unsure about what I should do for Dragon's Back, or, what would be your one piece of advice, if you can distill it down to one piece of advice? Because we've been talking now for a good half hour on where. So either somebody who was thinking about doing it, or is unsure about doing it.
I don't know if my advice would be. I think my advice would be just do hard things, and I think this is a good hard thing to try and do. But this is a very particular, specific race, so this one requires much more planning, probably higher volume training, and you have to think about all those things we've been talking about for half an hour, which might be too much for someone. But I wouldn't want that then to put them off the idea of doing hard races or hard challenges or big rounds. So I've got so much from doing that, from in terms of personal satisfaction and sort of inner monologue and that kind of stuff, plus communities of people I've got to meet and know, and things I've learned about them, and experiences I now want to do, and stories they've told me. And that's come through saying, when I booked a date to do a Bob Graham, and when I booked to do this, it's come from taking on that challenge I didn't know I could do, and then building a plan and getting closer and closer to doing it. And that journey's been great. So it would be do hard things, and the Dragon's Back could be a great one.
Do you have to be an elite runner?
No, not at all. Not at all. Right. The biggest trophy comes to the person who completes it but spends the most time on course. It's about 3 times the size of this.
And it's a brilliant trophy, isn't it? It is an amazing, amazing trophy.
Yeah. Don't need to be an elite runner. Different ways to do it. Everyone who gets to the finish line or even toes the line on any of the days is achieving something pretty cool.
Yeah, because I think that, you need a bit of competency to move in the mountains, don't you? To be successful at it. But as you say, it's going in with that right mindset that this is going to be hard, and making sure that preparation for it is kind of going in that right direction. And you can't kid yourself that, it's going to be a walk in the park.
But you wouldn't do it if it was going to be a walk in the park, because it's not a walk in the park. You go for a walk in the park if that's what you wanted to do. So
this is a run.
Yeah, exactly.
Down the mountains.
Along the length of Wales.
So brilliant. Well, thank you, Hugh.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming along the channel. If you've enjoyed this chat and interview, give it a thumbs up. If you've got some questions about maybe Dragon's Back race or some of the bits we've talked about, leave them in the comments down below. I'll get back to you. I can even maybe pass them over to Hugh to give some of his thoughts as well on that. If you've done the race as well, let us know. It'd be great to hear from you. We hope you've enjoyed it. We hope you found it informative, and maybe it's inspired you to do something hard, whether or not that be the Dragon's Back race or even an ultra marathon, or maybe just going out and running a 5K. But thank you very much, Hugh.
No worries, thanks for having me.
And we'll see you out on the trail sometime soon. Thanks now.